in this
Way
role.
to take control.
Yeah,
Plus,
I
really,
was just figuring that you were the last person that needed an introduction.
no. But since I talk about myself so much in this journey that I think you'll figure out who I am from what I say. So, Liz, am I good to start? Okay.
You are good to start, and Christina's having audio problems, so
No, it's
please
okay.
just start.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you today. Such an honor. I've done this a few times now, so if you've already heard my spiel, sit back and enjoy it again. This is, my leadership journey. As everyone knows, journeys are so different for everyone, and I would say that mine has, this many challenges, as you can imagine, triumphs, and kind of this unwaveringly pursuit of growth. Like I'm always trying to get better at what I'm doing. So leadership to me, it's not just holding a position or a title or being the superintendent. It's this commitment to continuous self-improvement and the ability to inspire those around me and help them reach their fullest potential. So, it's really kind of this testament to resilience and the importance of embracing change and being flexible and not needing an introduction before you have to speak to everyone. And since everything I have done my whole life has really formed who I am, I'm going to kind of start at the beginning and explain you from the my birth, which happened in Albert Lea, Minnesota, many, many years ago, but that's where I want to start. So I was born the 9th child in an Irish Catholic family in Minnesota. My parents had this, what I call this perfect record of being girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. So we all had this alternating gender thing. So every new baby had an older and a younger sibling, except for me, of course. I had an older brother and a basset hound. We always had basset hounds growing up. And so that was kind of my little brother, if you will. And of the 9 of us, which I believe is very impressive, they have 9 of us all have bachelor's degrees, 5 of us have master's degrees, and 2 of us have doctorate degrees. So clearly everyone in my family loves school. And, and as one of 9 growing up in this traditional Midwest Catholic family, my views of the world and how it goes really came from my parents and my family. So my dad, who is what we call the breadwinner, especially back in the day, it seemed like he kind of rejected this idea about women's roles, probably because his mother, who he grew up in Chicago, was a bank teller, and she always worked. So that's kind of what he was used to. And my dad really had, no limits on anything any of his daughters wanted to do. Like any dream we had, he was like, absolutely, let's figure out how to make it happen. But in spite of kind of this support and this idea of anything is open to you, really when you look at our careers, my sister's careers and myself, 2 of us pursued education, 2 of us are in medicine, and 1 served in hospitality. So kind of very female-oriented roles. My brothers in my family, they all, same thing, were very successful. 3 of them became leaders in business. One of my brothers flies for American Airlines as he retired from the military. And so in spite of kind of having this open-minded, you can do anything idea for all of my sisters, we all kind of landed in the support and caregiving roles. And my brothers all pursued more corporate leadership positions involving money, banking, business, and I guess military. So that to me was kind of interesting looking back on that. In high school, I was super involved with everything. I was a free sport athlete. I was in student government. I was always trying to improve something. And that probably had something to do with being the youngest of 9 kids. You always had to try to find a way to stand out. Maybe that was me trying to get attention looking back on it now. But I didn't realize it then. And so I would say that I'm a rule follower. Like I listened to my parents, I listened to my teachers, or really any adult around me who would give advice, I usually listened to them. After I graduated from high school, I went to Iowa State University, which is in Ames, Iowa, and kind of started my next educational adventure, if you will. loved going to college. It was so much fun. I started off as a chemistry major, and then I turned to science education. So I decided I wanted to teach science. And that's the first time I started reflecting kind of on my own educational philosophy and how that would impact my leadership style. So after graduation, I started teaching math at a middle school in an urban school district in Kansas City, Kansas. And I think that's interesting and super funny because I never actually taught science. And but then, and in some cases now too, if you have a teaching degree, you could take a subject test to be licensed to teach in a different area. And so even though I was licensed in science, I took a math test, and obviously as a chemistry major, I had enough math to do fine on that test. So I was able to teach middle school math, and I loved it. So that was super fun for me. And during my first teaching experience, I was exposed to, or I attended a training called the 4 A's. And the 4 A's were African American Academic Achievement Project. And that was by Glenn Singleton. And it was a year-long training for deinstitutionalizing racism and improving student achievement. And so all the way back there, not all the way, in the 90s, we were still doing that work. We were still doing kind of closing the gaps. And we still have not closed that opportunity or achievement gap for all students. And I think that's interesting because a lot of times people think that's new work, and it's not. Through that training, I really became very aware of the power that I held. And it was interesting because it was the first time I noticed that I had doors open to me for being white, but closed to me for being female. And that it was very noticeable. So at that time, my mind was really open to this idea that I wanted to learn more about this, and I was really ready to make a larger difference. But I really needed to know more. I needed to know how I could learn these skills in the area of understanding not only the conundrums I was facing as a female leader, but also facing my students while I was teaching in this urban public school and everything that they were dealing with, all the traumas of their life. So at that time, I wanted to figure out, why. So I could make kind of this difference in the world for my students. And so I decided at that time to do what I usually did when I didn't understand something, which was turn it back to education to figure out my next steps. So at that time, I started a counseling psychology program at the University of Kansas. And so through that program, I learned a ton. But most importantly, I learned about hope and the difference maker it can be for students and for families. And so at the time, my advisor, his name was Dr. Shane Lopez, he was a lead researcher in hope, and he would say that the belief that future will be better than the present, along with the idea that you have the power to make it that way. And so here's this idea, like, how can I have my students believe that their future could be better and that they get to decide whether or not it is to be that way? And that really resonated with me in my work, not only as a teacher, but as this idea that I'm gonna could also be a counselor. So I found that kids who are hopeful had higher self-esteem and social skills, and they were able to set academic and social goals, and then they'd be able to bounce back when they hit adversity. So it was a pretty cool thing to watch in the classroom with your students. And this actually proved to be true regardless of where they live, the color of their skin, whether or not they were female or male. I mean, every kind of difference between students, I felt like if they had this hope idea, that they could be successful. So now I was like, I have a new goal. I'm going to figure out how to create hope in all these students. I can help them live this happier and fuller life. And in turn, they would become more academically successful, and then they'd be more successful in their career. So it seemed like I had figured it out. I was like, wow, here I go. This is what I want to tackle. And then at that time, which happened to me a lot, we were moved. So my husband's job, he moved from Kansas City to St. Louis at that time. And so I moved from being a teacher to a counselor. And I loved being a counselor. I always felt that I was making a difference with students. I felt like it was transformational. And it's interesting when you look at teachers, because a lot of times what you find are math teachers are very black and white thinking. They really have a hard time finding that gray. And then counselors are the opposite. They're usually pretty gray and they have a hard time finding the black and white. So I felt like I was a good mix between those two things. And after a few years of working with adolescents as a counselor in the Midwest, so both in Kansas City and St. Louis, my husband took another job in Portland, Oregon. So I had to say goodbye to all the students and family and friends I had there and move out to Oregon. And it really did feel kind of like that video game, the Oregon Trail, kind of new adventures, behind every screen. So this was June of 2003. And at that time, there were very few positions open in public schools. There were a lot of cuts that were being done at that time. But one position opened at Waluga Junior High. So that was shortly after I moved, and I applied and had the privilege of being selected to serve as a counselor here in Lake Oswego after meeting Dr. Korach, because he interviewed every person who got a job here at that time. And after about 6 months of being at Waluga, our assistant principal moved to a new district. Well, he was planning on moving to a new district after the school year. So it caused this opening to be in our, in our administration. So I was pretty honored to be selected by our staff for just knowing them a really short amount of time to be on this hiring committee. And there were 3 staff members, 3 parents, a district administrator, principal, a school board member, and of course, Dr. Korach. And we were sitting there, and I'll never forget this, which is why I talk about it all the time. We're sitting there in like this horseshoe formation in the boardroom, and the finalists was sitting in the middle. And I'm sure it was super intimidating for those people. And I didn't know Dr. Korach very well at this time, but it was clear from the interview debrief that he had somebody who he really liked. And it was clear that the parent-teacher group kind of liked the other candidate. So it was a tough decision, because what people don't usually realize is that with a VP role, you don't have experience, and they're usually coming from a teacher role or a counselor role, some other person in the school building. So right there, kind of in this heated discussion about which one was going to be better, one of the teachers on the committee said, well, if we're going to hire someone with no experience, why don't we just hire Jen? And he pointed at me. And I remember being absolutely shocked, like, I didn't want to be the assistant principal. I didn't apply for this job. I had just moved here. I wasn't qualified. I didn't have a license. And the group didn't decide on a candidate that day. I think Bill recognized something odd was going on and kind of closed the meeting and said, we're going to get back together. So then earlier in that evening, like once I got home, Sherry, who was Dr. Korach's assistant, called me at home and asked if I wanted to come into his office and interview for this position. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't know if I want to interview for the position. I don't even know what it is really. But shortly thereafter, as a rule follower that I am, when someone asked me to do something, I come in and I interview with him and the school board chair. And to this day, I'm not really sure what they saw in me, and maybe he could say that, but I was so thankful now that they believed in me and ultimately offered me this new position as the assistant principal. And this brought me a whole new set of challenges, because now, and I had a brand new, I think Flynn was 5 months old at the time. So I had a baby, and I had the challenge of going back to school to get my administrative license. So it was like, okay, here we go again. And starting school again sparked this new side of me that I'm actually very familiar with, which is this curiosity about this new career path I'm having as an administrator. And I'm always like all in anytime I'm going to do something. So in class one day, I was standing in the circle with my classmates and my professor, Dr. Mike Hauser, who ended up being my advisor for my doctorate program. And she had everyone take one step in the circle when they agreed with the career aspirations she noted. So she'd be like, who wants to be an assistant principal? And everybody walked forward. And who wants to be a principal? And, people kept walking forward. And then some people stopped moving forward. And then they asked about central office administrator, and a few stepped forward, and then assistant superintendent. And finally, who wants to be a superintendent? And I looked around my class, and of the 25 people, I was the only one still standing there, which seemed odd because I never ever wanted, I mean, in my head, I didn't want to be a superintendent, and I didn't grow up thinking this is a job that I wanted to do. I just realized at the time, kind of being curious and just thinking like, yeah, absolutely. If there's another job beyond that, I will try that. I will try that. And I will try that. And so I also realized that I'm a planner at that time. So I need to figure out, like, now I've committed to saying I want to do this job in front of all these people who I don't know very well. So now I need to figure out, how can I make sure that my professional goals, I have a pathway to get there. So, and then as some of you know, my roles have changed over the time in Lake Oswego. I was an assistant principal, and then I was a principal at both Waluga, which is Lake Ridge Middle School now, and Lake Ridge High School. Amazing roles. I cherish the time there with those students and staff and families. And I just ran into some people at Duke's that I felt like they were still 18, and they're like, yeah, 28, this is my wife and my kid. And I was like, what? How is that possible? So I loved working there. And then I went to the assistant superintendent job, stepping away from the building, which was very hard for me. And having to look at the system from a much larger viewpoint, and then ultimately being selected as the superintendent. So ultimately, kind of this career path that I've had, or on the job training with students, teachers, families, taught me all the tactical leadership skills I would need. They really prepared me for this role, but there is so much more about what you need to become the superintendent. So I guess I want to move into telling you a little bit about what research tells you about females in executive leadership roles. And I see that there are females here, so you may find this interesting, and you probably already know it if you're a female leader. But at first I have to tell you a story that I always love telling people because it is so formative for me. And I find it so fascinating still every time I say it. And it just is really important that people understand where this comes from. So many years ago, I was driving my son's name is Flynn, and a few of his friends to baseball practice. And those of you who have kids know that driving your kids around is sometimes the only way you learn what's going on in their lives. So the boys were having this conversation, and they were in elementary school, so they were pretty young, about who could be the president of the United States. You know, a conversation you probably would hear right now. And my son blurted out that his father should run. So he said, like, my dad should run. And I immediately said, hey, what about your mom? To which he replied, Mom, you can't be the president. You're not a man. And I was just in absolute shock. I mean, I can't believe that my 7-year-old boy sliced through this dream of not really me becoming the president, because I did not want to be the president, but this idea of my own family believing that kids could grow up to be whatever they wanted to, and if they were smart enough and they worked hard enough and talent and skill could earn them the position to be the top position of whatever they wanted. So I really could not figure out why he would say this to his friends. Like, did I say something, or did my husband say something to him that gave him this idea? And I was just so shocked. And then a few days later, the same boys, different practice, driving again, another interesting conversation starts. And one of the boys asks the other boys why they thought all their teachers were girls. And then again, my little son says, without saying it, without even thinking, well, that's an easy one. Everyone knows girls are smarter than boys. So of course they're going to be the teachers. And so now I'm thinking, like, this is fascinating. Like, how are these stereotypes that continue to exist after years and years of progress? Could many people, even little kids or my kids, think women are just as smart as men, or maybe even smarter, but they're just not equipped for positions of power or leadership? And at this time, I was kind of figuring out that I needed to learn more about female leadership, because I needed to ensure my own success if I really was going to reach a superintendency. So at that time, I started my doctorate degree to learn everything I could to prepare me mentally for this job of superintendency that I didn't even really know if I wanted, but I knew I would want to have the skills it took if I wanted to do it sometime. So I poured myself into my doctorate studies, everything to do with female superintendents. And the research is quite fascinating. Like, in 1909, Ella Young, who was the first woman superintendent in Chicago, predicted and said that women were destined to rule schools in every city across America. And ironically, that hasn't happened. And little has changed for women in superintendency roles over the years. Of the 14,000-ish superintendents in the nation, 27 of them are women, 27% are women. In Oregon, it's 23%. And that may not seem so distorted to you, but if you think about it in the way that it's about 72% of all educators K-12 are female. So as you can imagine, that very pool in which districts usually find leaders, which are teachers, and there are some districts, I should say, that go outside of education to find superintendents, but it's kind of rare. That seems very disheartening. So it's shown in research that leadership styles of women reveal that they're perceived by others as being change agents. They use interactive leadership, transformational leadership. They believe in inclusion and nurturing, empathy, sensitivity, caring, supporting, compassion, attention to detail, all the leadership skills you would think that you would want in a superintendent role. I mean, it is for me anyway, but that's just not the case across our state or our country. And that made me wonder, like, why is that? And so as I'm digging into the research about female superintendents, it came up that it's pretty standard what the barriers are for women searching for these top roles. And it does kind of go over the same from education top roles to business top roles. And they tend to be general theories on glass ceilings, lack of mentoring, community resistance, traditional search consultants, meaning if there is a headhunter, they're usually men and they tend to look for other men. Lack of appropriate preparation also appears frequently in qualitative and quantitative studies. And so, as you can imagine, barriers can be both internal or self-imposed, like a desire to stay home with your own children versus caring for other people's children, or external, like a school board holding women to a higher standard than they would hold a man, including being an expert in all areas of operations and not just kind of a big picture thinker where they delegate a lot. So barriers are very real and are put in place for some people to navigate and others kind of just to breeze over. And I recognize this is not just the case, again, in education. Many top executive positions are blocked out for women. There's lots of studies out there also about salaries and the difference of salaries. And sometimes this is done on purpose. And like I said, sometimes it's done by accident. And women need to consider, what supports are needed if you're ever going to try to get one of those top leadership roles, because it's in the research that supports obviously can help with those barriers. And so you want to make sure that they're all in place for you to have a higher chance of being successful. So recognizing that there are many barriers, I narrowed down all the research to 3 main supports that are necessary for women to achieve success. And this was part of my research from interviewing many superintendents across the Northwest. And the number one thing was a supportive family and friends. And this support can be from a spouse or partner who can embrace that non-traditional view of gender roles. Because the thing is superintendency, along with any kind of CEO, CFO, it's long hours and there is never an off button. I can tell you even last week during the ice storm, I was at work every day, every night. I'm getting calls, I'm getting emails. I don't actually remember the last time I was able to just shut down. And so you have to have someone that can support that. So it's important to have like this understanding partner who can help you mentally. And I am extremely lucky in that regard. So my husband's name is Scott. We've been married for 26 years. He's truly a partner and he always considers my hopes or dreams just as important as his own. And I feel very lucky to have that. And I would never even have considered applying for this type of role without his support. And actually when it came open and the previous superintendent decided to move back to Colorado, I sat down with Scott and Flynn, my son, and Brooklyn, my daughter, and I said, hey, so I'm not sure that this is the best timing for us, but, what do you think about this? And my hilarious children were immediately like, it's about time, Mom. Yes, absolutely, you need to go for this. So I just feel really lucky that I have my family. And so that's something that you need to have in place if you want that type of role. The second one that I found is mentorship. So mentors can play a huge role in helping women and men as well learn to successfully combine this professional and personal life. So mentors can model flexibility in how you combine these roles, because like I said, there's never an off. So you can't just compartmentalize these two jobs. Women should feel, that they're able to blend those two jobs together, and that, you need help to be able to do that, to kind of integrate that personal, family, and professional life. So mentors can add support and provide information on career paths and professional development, which are really helpful in achieving that leadership role. Plus, great mentors know how to connect people to whatever their dreams are. So I feel really lucky to have a variety of mentors, including males and females, across many states that I gain guidance from during great. They're always there to celebrate with me, and also not so great. Challenging times, you really need to be able to call upon someone and get some advice. So I believe that is a must. And I'm committed now, as somebody who has more experience in this area, to really paying it forward to other women who are looking to move in that direction and really empowering that next generation of leaders. And which is really important for women to do for other women. Otherwise, they will not have that role model that you can be for them. And then lastly, number 3 is competence. So one has to understand this role. Superintendent has to understand its ins and outs of curriculum, instruction, assessment, staff development, human resources, interventions, strategic planning, finance, school boards, facilities. There's so many things, but last and not least is politics, because you're dealing with a lot of people, and everybody brings in their own opinion, and everyone likes to give it to you too. So you can never lose sight of your own humility. And I would say humility isn't about the lack of self-confidence. It's about being grounded and knowing that we're all flawed. And, you can't lose sight of the reality that people make mistakes. We're human beings. And no one can be the master in all of those areas. And so it's really important as a leader to collaborate with others. And it's important to hire those around you with specific expertise that build your team. Putting a bunch of people around you who have the same skill set as you is not going to work. So, no great success is going to be achieved alone. It's collective effort. And I've had the privilege of working with such incredible individuals with diverse perspectives and skills. And that really has enriched my own understanding and has helped our district navigate through some pretty challenging situations. One book that I love, it's called I Love It Here, and it's by Pulver. He lists 4 principles when you're hiring your kind of dream team, and I find it really helpful. Number 1 was hire the right person, not the convenient person. Sometimes that can be hard. 2 was hire internally when possible, and that's for obvious reasons of understanding your culture. 3 is hire for ABCs, which is attitude, behavior, and character. And then the last one is let your employees focus on what they do best. And that's kind of that idea of finding their strengths and letting them all work together to build something even stronger. So, you're probably wondering, how does this all tie in? But I have used my experiences and my education, definitely the research that I've done on barriers and support structures. And obviously, I've had a lot of luck to develop my own leadership and understanding who I am. And as a school leader, I believe it's my responsibility to serve the students, staff, the community as an energizing leader, exhibiting the qualities that engage others to join together to do what's best for our students, for each and every student. And I believe one of my strengths is the ability to identify and promote kind of this collective vision for our school team and our community, while remaining cognizant of each individual belief. And that can be hard because you're big picture and then you're kind of a detailed person, but I can understand that. I understand every decision, who it's going to affect, who's going to like it, and who's not going to like it. And that's important to understand. I also operate kind of under this theory that effective teachers and educators believe the power of knowledge. Understanding is important. They value relationships within the school community, and they're convinced that kids have the capacity to learn. It's really important, especially in education, to believe in students and that every child can grow. And the second you start thinking like this group of students or this group of students can't grow, that's not okay. So I believe in inclusive schools for students where everyone has that place and purpose in their community. So it's not only just about being welcome there, it's about contributing to our excellence, and why that's so important for students to feel that sense of belonging and contributing. And then above everything else, I believe in relationships. So I know in this group, you talk a lot about relationships, but my desire to the commitment to kind of establishing growing relationships is really a significant part of what makes me, me. So when they're true relationships, we're able to talk openly and honestly about what makes us successful, but also what needs improvement. And I think that's the only way where you can become great, and really talking about what needs improvement. So it's kind of that idea of creating the conditions for other people's success, which is something I definitely learned from Dr. Korach, and how you do that for others is super important. So having the experiences and skills needed for this role is awesome, and it's fantastic, but it gets you the role, but then you have to figure out how to keep your role. And as a leader, you must have a plan to keep that work going. And in schools and in some businesses, they call that strategic plan. So in our school district, the strategic plan is created by a group of people, including the board, employees, and then students and community members with that larger constituent input. Businesses can be different on their strategic plans, but I think in Lake Oswego, one thing that we do really well is involve our community in those things. And our community at this time, we have a strategic plan. It has 4 pillars, and they're all truly essential for this educational excellence. So our first one in Lake Oswego is called Creating a Culture of Belonging. And it really, for a person to grow and achieve and thrive, I mean, science will show you that a person must feel a sense of belonging, and we want LSD to be a collaborative learning and working environment where everyone, including our teachers, so a lot of times people think these are just about students, but our teachers need to also feel confident and supported, and we want everyone to be heard and contribute and excel. Our second priority in Lake Oswego is achieving equitable academic outcomes. And this sets out to ensure that each and every student is provided with the tools and the supports and the experience they need to be successful and reach their full potential. And so this means like breaking down barriers, which is something I'm very familiar with, as you've heard, and building up those supports and services to ensure our students demonstrate the proficiency at or above their grade level. And this could be anything from learning how to read or developing a new talent, finding a new passion in school. It really just makes sure that we have students have these educational experiences and opportunities to be successful in college and career and in school, and really more importantly, in life. The third priority is promoting health and resiliency. And many of us know health has been at the front and center of many of our minds since pandemic. And it's been proven that health and resiliency are driving factors in a person's success for school and, as I mentioned, life. So for Lake Oswego, it's about addressing the needs of the whole child, mentally, socially, emotionally, and physically. So having a culture that models healthy choices, food, exercise, lifestyle, and well-being. And then lastly, our fourth priority is about teaching and practicing sustainability. And this is ultimately about being good stewards of our shared resources. It involves our leadership structure as well as curriculum and our facilities as we continue to remodel and build new buildings. And by teaching and practicing sustainability, we support critical thinkers, global problem solving, and we really, this particular priority comes a lot from our students. They believe deeply that we should be creating a world that that they can live in and their grandchildren can live in it too. So in addition to, the strategic plan that we have, a good leader, and I would suggest this to everyone here, really has to be ready to review and pivot, like adjust. Everyone has to be real flexible with that. So one of the key lessons I've learned along the way is this adaptability in a world that's constantly evolving. And as we all know, you just have to be able to adapt. You cannot be stuck in the mud. Embracing change, whether it's like workplace or our personal lives, just opens up new learning and innovation. So it allows us to be proactive rather than reactive, which is a huge part. You have to turn challenges into opportunities. And your plan really is only as good as the people reviewing it and adjusting it. So I think it's really key is that flexibility, especially in schools, because schools are all about the people, and flexibility is key in working with people. And then lastly, I would just say, I've always believed it's really important to celebrate, because I feel like in our nonstop 24/7 world, it's so easy to place that focus on the very next task at hand and forget to stop and say, wow, look at what has been achieved. And if you forget to celebrate, you miss that opportunity to not only inspire those around you, that greater success, but to strengthen your own leadership. So I really believe that a strong culture of praise increases engagement, increases productivity, and really that resilience to any kind of upcoming challenge. Like we met it and we overcame it, so that's awesome. Let's have crumble cookies. And I mean, it doesn't always have to be a big celebration, but sometimes just the small things really add up for people. So that in a nutshell, I guess, is who I am and how my family and hope and hard work has kind of helped me earn this role as the Lake Oswego School Superintendent, a job that I love, and I hope to stay for a long time. So with that, I guess I'll stop and see if there are any questions from anyone here. You don't have to ask a question, but Christopher always has one, so
Well, Jennifer, I really appreciate the things that you say all of the time. And when you talked about the importance of hope and how that cuts through everything, what stood out to me was that hope had two aspects. One was the belief that things could get better, but I think the second part was incredibly important, the belief that you can have something to do about that.
yeah.
So when you are trying to transmit hope or encourage hope or inspire hope or however you view that, how do you assist people in feeling as if they can have a role in that? Have you learned anything that's critical to that or a way of assisting in that process?
Sure. I would say one big thing has to do with listening and trying to support, like, for example, when students come to us with ideas, even when we don't necessarily believe that they're the best idea, we try to say yes. We try to say, yes, let us help you get your dream accomplished, so that they can feel like people around them believe in them enough to support them through something that may be challenging in their school, may be challenging in their community, but they have to believe that they can make a difference and that it can come out the other side, and they made it. And that's a big part of being just resilient as well, which gives students the hope that the future has a lot to do with how they build it, not just necessarily what happens to them.
Thank you.
George, you got a headache?
I don't have a headache. I actually just decided to raise my hand and ask you a question. That's just my resting face.
Okay.
I think in hearing what you talked about today, especially when we focus on female leadership, the profession that I work in is highly challenged in really promoting the concept of giving people an equal opportunity. I'll just say it that way. I know that we focus it here, and I know that other agencies I've worked at, we focused on making sure that we look at the mentorship and development of all of the employees and make sure that we're not excluding those that really would like a chance and an opportunity. One of the things in talking to somebody the other day, they discussed the feeling that they carry this burden of trying to be that messenger or be that face for all the people that look like them. I'm wondering how that has worked. I mean, how that has impacted you, and if you felt as though you had to be the champion at some point, and if that caused some level of frustration for you.
Yeah, it hasn't caused me frustration, but I can tell you that it is a burden some people have, that they have to kind of champion this all the time. And no one could say, like, I can't speak for all women the same way a person of color can't speak for all people of color. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. We're all individuals. But I can say that through support, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like in your case with the police, having a mentor in police, it could just be another woman leader and helping support getting those connections made. One of the studies that I did during my research had to do, especially with women, women tend to step up when asked to do something. So very different from men who thrive on trying to do things without being asked. Women usually sit back and wait until they're asked to do something, and then they get excited about doing it. It's very different psychological for women that way. One thing that I did, I started sending leadership articles to, when I was a middle school principal, to women on my staff. Just a few select women who were on my staff, who I believed had leadership potential, sending them articles, having little discussions with them in the hallway, trying to make sure that they could see some of that support. And of the 5 women that I sent that to, and I did it for 6 months just to see what would happen. In 6 months, 4 of the 5 all chose to go into an administrative program. All because I was just sending them articles and having little conversations in the hallway. And it came out in my research. I mean, that's pretty significant just for that little piece. They were not trying to be administrators. Just that little bit of support, a couple articles and a couple of short conversations in the hallway gave them the will to want to earn or learn those skills of being an administrator. So I think I can't really look at it like a burden, because it is part of being a woman, I guess. And so I like to support other women who are in those roles. And even if they're just questioning, like, what should I do next? Because it's complex. It's complex for everyone. So I don't want to just say it is for women, but there is an innate feeling, especially if you have children, that you are leaving your children to go and help other people. And that is very hard. And I learned from experience that I thought all principals were going to be like how I was with my kids, really taking care of all these kids. And I found out that that wasn't the case. And so you have to make sure that your own kids also feel the love and support of their mother and other women and other men who support your kids, to make sure that they're not struggling. And so it's a lot of stress. And how you manage it really does mean you need to have more people helping you. You know, it's that whole support idea. And I think the more you can go into any kind of role like that, understanding what's going to be in your way and what supports you can put in place, the better off you're going to be. Like, kind of going in with your eyes wide open. Are you saying bye-bye, Bill? Oh, you're saying bye to Liz. Oh, sorry.
You've got Cece up
Yes.
in the
Hi.
left corner, and then we'll have Bill.
Okay.
Hi, this is Cecily. But hi, Jennifer, and hi, George. We have decided to be partner with each other, but you were sick, so this is the first chance we get to see each other here. And I have to say thank you for your question. That was the excellent question. I enjoyed the question and enjoyed the answer very much. That's so much needed to be addressed. And Jennifer, when you mentioned about when we present ourselves out there, all the point that you make, I agree all, especially as a mom with children. We always have the thinking, how would we like our children to be out there to serve the society? And I agree with you wholeheartedly for that. One thing I would like to ask is, I always go with seek to understand before wanting to be understood. In the society or in the situation, have you ever encountered a situation where the bias happened to be just there in front of you just shut you down just because how they think of you and how they look at you and how everything is just, oh, I just have my personal feeling that I just want to shut down. There's no way that you would be able to have a chance to really seek to understand or even have a chance to build the relationship. Have you ever having that kind of experience, and how do you feel and how do you resolve that situation? Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And I have been in those experiences where I've had parents who really believe that the person in a principal role, or definitely this role, should not look like me. I think what I do, because it is hard, and there are times when you want to break down and cry, and I'm actually a big crier. People should know that I cry at almost everything. Not in front of people necessarily, but the second they leave. So I try to put up this hard shell. And I think Bill had even said to me at one point, like, if I wanted to be the superintendent, I was going to have to get thicker skin. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know how to get thicker skin because this is the only skin that I have. But what I've learned to do with that is more about that I truly believe that everybody does the best they can with what they have. And I believe that if somebody is questioning me or my role or my leadership, I do believe that it comes from somewhere very deep in their upbringing and their life. And I'm probably not going to be able to change that. And so all I do is give them the understanding that they have their invisible backpack, and whatever's in it, I can't see and I'm not going to understand, but I'm going to believe that they're doing the best they can with what they have. And I've gone through some really difficult times thinking that and believing that about whoever I'm working with.
Thank you. And I just want to mention one thing. You're talking about everything, the list there. I always stay curious. And one of the thing I always seeking for searching the philosophers. One of them was the great Jim Rohn. The other one is John Maxwell. And I do remember the book that John Maxwell was talking about, talent is not enough. And that one of them is my favorite. Just want to share that.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. It's not, talent's not enough. You need some other things as well.
Jim, I have always been a huge fan, and you have been very, very impressive in the roles that you've been in when you weren't in charge and when you have been in charge. We are very fortunate, I believe, in this community right now to have three very, very good, powerful, and effective female leaders. One in the city, in Marcia and or Martha, and one here with Liz and you in the school district, and they're all female. So when you talked to us now, you have some very, very interesting insights with your dissertation and what you've done to promote and help female leaders to become what they're capable of becoming. So just a quick little notion, do you benefit at all because the other two people who are in key roles that you need to interact with all the time are female? Is there an advantage that you would see with that? And is there any kind of a disadvantage in that?
I don't see a disadvantage. I mean, I work very closely with Liz. Obviously, I've known Liz was, the parent club president when I was the principal. So I've known her for many, many years. Martha and I get along great. She's amazing. And that is also a huge job that she has, that, we text each other often, so it's nice to have the relationship with her and know, I can shoot her a photo last Saturday of country club saying, I need this cleared because I can't get kids to walk across the street, she's going to answer me. So I think it has more to do with the advantage of having our particular community, which is small enough where we know each other well enough to get an answer pretty quickly. And I feel the same thing about George. I mean, I can text him and he texts me back in a second. So
Mhm.
not all communities are as lucky as we are to have such a close-knit community, including our city officials and our school district officials. So I think the advantage has more to do with not necessarily being a woman or a man, but being very close, very relational type of, and small enough where we can have those relations. I don't need to call George's assistant to ask if I can come and see him. I can just text.
So it's much more of a supportive than competitive relationship.
Yes,
Okay. Super. Great job, Jen. Great job.
thanks.
Well, I will just jump in since I didn't get to introduce you, and thank you, Jen, for punting. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. I know you are a very busy lady, probably especially after an unexpected week off of school. So thank you for being here and sharing all you could about hope and building a culture of inclusivity and breaking down barriers. It's amazing to hear. I was going to say in the introduction that if you all have not had a chance or aren't aware, Jen did start a podcast, Leadership in Lake Oswego, which is a great thing to listen to and hear more about her perspectives on leadership. But she also invites other guests, students and teachers and other people who are sharing their perspectives. So if you have not listened to it, I really encourage you to do so. And thank you for bringing that to our community as well, Jen.
Absolutely. Super fun. And yes, it's Learning in Lake Oswego, my podcast. And, it goes from the beginning where I was super nervous because I don't like the sound of my own voice to now it's like, it's super funny. So we have a great time with it. And the kids and the staff that join me on the podcast I do it about every 2 weeks. So it's fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So thank you for that. Thank you everyone for your great questions. Let's do maybe a 5-minute break and come back at 10 a.m. Jen, thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
All right, do you want me to leave it open to talk, or do you want to, we'll go ahead and mute it. Okay, we'll be back in just 1 minute here.
Sorry again about that, Liz.
Oh, it happens.
Oh my gosh. I feel like that computer might have, I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
No, it's, let me. See if I can get.
And then I still do need to jump off a little bit early today too. So I'm really, I'm a mess today. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
As long as you're here for the passing of the hat, Christina, that's all we need, just
Yeah, totally. I don't know what was wrong with my computer. I'm here till, I don't know, like 11:30-ish today, and then I'll have to jump off.
You're doing the best you can with what you have.
Thank you, Susan.
firmly believe that.
All right, it's 10 a.m. and I am turning it over to Bill Korach.
Well, we got to have a few more people back, so I want to get started as soon as we can do that. And so if you would help me by actually being visible to me when you're back. I've got people's names in front of me, but I would ask that anybody who's capable of being visible to me would do so I can get started here and feel like that we're actually connected somewhat. Well, that didn't have anybody else come and
Answered your question.
There we go.
One of the things, thanks, Parker, and you and I need to get together too, Parker. One of the things that I do want to affirm, and I'll do that right now. When Jen started, she talked about a group where we were interviewing, and we, have group interviews, and to select people. We would never be able to select a candidate to be an administrator if the staff didn't want the person. And, the administration thought that one person would be a better choice because she had more experience, but neither one were a good candidate. And we got lucky beyond all belief that we had a Jennifer Schiele sitting right there who had just joined us that we weren't very familiar with yet in half a year. And so we just got incredibly lucky, and this school district, I believe, is so fortunate in community to have her leadership. So anyway, I'm glad she was able to speak to you, and she's for real. She's got the right stuff. Absolutely. Now, what we're going to do today, we are going to talk about similarities and differences. But I'm going to jump around some in the material. You've read the material, and we're going to put you into groups a little sooner than usual. And I hope you've spent some time thinking about the questions that I have at the bottom of the first page. And Liz, if you put that first slide up, I want to start with a little story that connects with the Einstein quote. The most beautiful thing that we can experience is the mysterious. And what I like about that quote is that we are individually mysterious to ourselves. And so one of the things that is so important is to start making connections with the ideas that we're working with so you can draw from them as you make your decisions. And you select from all of the choices that you have from your experience and from what you've learned, and how you feel. And so I like that quote because if you can't be connected to the feeling of being alive as a person and have the opportunity to make a difference in the world as a leader, everyone really has to be their own leader. And so here's my little starting point. And anytime we start doing something, we're at a disadvantage of learning new things, because we usually have to start on a very surface level. Right now in our work together, you're not completely connecting everything. None of us are in that particular position in all likelihood. Remember, now I've done 35 years teaching this stuff at the university level, and so I'm a little bit more schooled on probably how to connect some of these ideas. So today we're going to start with a little story, and then we're going to move right into those questions that I have at the bottom of the page. So my little story, those are the questions, and Liz just brought them up. But my little story for you is my first teaching opportunity. As a student teacher, I was coming from Washington State University, and I went home to my home community so I could be mentored by the teacher that taught me as a member of her senior class in the honors program, that was an outstanding teacher who had been a teacher for a long time. She was in her probably 55, 56 sort of range as a teacher. She's a very experienced teacher, very bright, and very old school teacher. Now, so I had come up to being ready to do the first lesson that I got a chance to teach with the university observer who had come to watch me. And she was the one that was going to be writing up whether I was worthy or not. And so was my former teacher. And so at that particular point in time, I put together my lesson, and I thought one of the things that I could do that should engage them, kind of just thinking about engagement, is to bring a record player in and have a song for them to work with as an enhancement to the lesson that I was going to do. Because the focus of my lesson was going to be the difference between how you feel about something and how you think about something, and try to engage them in that way. And in my opinion, I thought it went very well. My meeting with the supervisor from Washington State, said it was the best lesson she'd ever seen a student teacher do. Now there's a problem with that. That's what she said to me. So when I had a chance then to meet with my supervising teacher, Mabel Thompson, and sat down, I was just pumped because the kids were into it. We were doing, I thought, really interesting and engaging stuff. And so the first thing that she said was that it was pretty good. However, you have to remember, this particular supervisor has just started the job, and she's only seen 2 people teach before she saw you. So that diminished a little bit of my enthusiasm. That set me up to know that, okay, what do you think, Mabel? You know, what are you going to say? And she said, but one thing that I would have you think about, and this is a kind of advice that has been with me for a long time. The one thing she would have me think about is, what difference did it make? And she said, I want you to think about that, because your role as a teacher is to make a difference for the students that you're teaching. Just like your role as a leader is to make a difference for the people that you are working with to lead. And so at first I didn't quite get it, because I thought, well, hey, you mean I have to engage him and be cool and, you know, be really connective and all that sort of stuff, and I still have to make a difference? What does that mean? It took me about 3 years to really understand what she meant about making a difference, so that I would be teaching something that they would have the ability to remember and apply in their world. And sure, her idea was, eventually I understood it, her idea was that they had to be able to remember and apply something. And did you really get there? Did you really focus on that? Or did you just take advantage of them liking the song? Now, when I'm asking you to look at the materials that we have, what I'm hoping for is that you ask yourself the questions that are going to help you grow and become the person that you want to become as a leader and as a person, because those two things are interconnected, obviously. The person you are and the leader you're going to be are developing at the same time. And so I'm not going to stop and go right into the importance of you shining the light on what you're trying to do to improve. That's up above. I want to take us right into number one below in those particular questions. And now, what have I set up? You've got a group you're going to go into. I've asked you to look at the similarities and differences between good advice and bad advice. For me, Mabel Thompson's advice was really good advice, because it caused me to engage and think about the person that I was, the person that I wanted to be, my purpose as I wanted to develop as a teacher, and certainly as an administrator eventually. But I have defined good advice and bad advice for you in simple terms. And I'm going to ask you to go into your groups, and I'm going to ask you to do number one first, and then we're going to talk about it. So a leader's credibility is almost always judged by others on the leader's know-how and capability of making things work. Is that good advice? Is it on that side of the dynamic, or is that bad advice? Would you say that that's something you should hold on to and think about just for perspective, or is that guidance? or is it not really great advice as far as you're concerned? So your group, I'm asking your group to look at this one and do two things. Is it similar to good advice, given my definition? You think it's true and you think it'll work for you to help you, or not? That's bad advice. And so I'm going to give you an amount of time in your group to talk it over and see if you can get a group decision. Is it good advice or is it bad advice? And why? So I want 2 reasons why. I want your group to give me good advice or bad advice, and 2 reasons that you think support your belief as a group about good advice versus bad advice. And as a leader, you're going to make lots of decisions. Some are going to be much better than others. And many of them will be very successful if you're thoughtful and if you're applying what we know, that how the brain works, and you're shining the light on your own thinking process. So let's go into the group. This time, what I'd like you to do, because we're going to do all 3 of these, is let's just do about 6 to 8 minutes. I'll check in with you on how you're doing on this one. So you're going to go into your group. You understand what I'm asking you to do, and talk with each other and weigh it. And then we'll have a person in your group present at the end when you come back. Okay? Hey, we'll start with the idea of 8 minutes. Hopefully you can do it in 8 minutes.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
All right, everybody is back.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, let's ask who'd like to go first. So essentially, is this something that you might want to keep in mind as a leader?
Susan wants to go first.
Who wants to?
Susan.
Susan, go for it.
Dan.
Yeah. Well, we came up with a kind of a couple of answers because it really depends on what your perspective is. So from a very high, good Lord, you're messing with me. From a very high standpoint, a leader is judged on whether or not they can make things work, because that's the bottom line. But when you get down into like a more micro view, it's, yeah, you're going to be judged on that, but that's incomplete. And it's also about, did the leader develop their team? Did the leader make people feel included? Did, all these kinds of things. And one of our, well, Judy mentioned that she doesn't like the word judged. So maybe we say evaluated. So so it just depends on where you're looking, if it's good advice or bad advice. Good advice from a high level, maybe bad or incomplete advice from a low level.
Excellent perspective. It's not complete, in other words. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan next.
Dan?
Yeah, we had a huge debate, so I'm just winging it here because there was no consensus. But just a couple of ways different people looked at it. I kind of live by the thought that all advice is good advice. Some of it you may choose to ignore, but it's still advice to go, boy, I don't want to follow that one, but thanks for putting it out there so I know which way not to go. The other thing is, though, you look, there was just a TV show that was pretty successful called Ted Lasso. And that's really the deal with that whole show, is exactly what this question kind of raises, is do you, that he did not have the skill set to coach what Europeans call football, which we call soccer, but yet he had mentality and coaching ideas and management ideas that worked across the board, but you had to give him a chance, and maybe his techniques didn't make sense up front. And over the period of the show, everything came to light and it started making sense. And obviously, there's, all kinds of takeaways from that show. But I think that's kind of the deal is, yeah, people are going to judge you by your results. But, somebody said the ends justify the means, and you have to be, Andrea said that, and you have to be very, very careful of that you can't just blindly go, okay, I'm going to cut corners. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. But I think you do have to have a goal of, you have to have some base level trust in yourself that you can lead.
Super, super. You're adding, there are different perspectives and different ways to look at it. And that's so important that you actually look at it. And when we talk about system one thinking, that automatic thinking, and then system two thinking, where we consider it more and think about different perspectives. So important that leaders think and consider options and perspectives as they weigh things. Excellent. Good start. Good start. Where are we going now? Trevor.
All right. Good morning. So we focused in our group about ability versus credibility, with ability leaning towards your know-how of your personal qualifications and how you know and feel about something. And then I contributed kind of like your credibility versus that in terms of contrast, of how you can get things done, being results oriented and results driven. I think a lot of someone's credibility as a leader is based off of how things get done, how Joe Buck handled the winter storm disaster that we had. All the feedback that we gave as a community was that it was handled very well in terms of communication and resources that are available. I, as a small, as a doctor with my business being affected, I felt like I was very heard. Things were communicated to me very well. And I then, just pivoting back towards, is it good advice or bad advice? A lot of our group thought it was kind of half good, half bad, thinking in absolutes versus partialities. My initial thought was that I thought it was good advice, especially when you're looking at a results driven component or a leadership over, just being able to task things out and get things done. We had a lot of conversation about it. It was hard to get a consensus as well.
Yeah, excellent. Good job. You are very accomplished people, and so it is good to hear you relating the things that we have talked about and even using the terms. We're last one. Who's the last one up?
Well, I think that's me. I think somebody threw me out there to be the person.
Oh, good job, George.
So here we go. So a lot of it's already been said. It's all about perspective, and what we talked about in great detail is the fact that this is clearly, the statement is coming from an outside perspective from that of the leader, because I don't think a leader would say this. I don't think a leader would say that this is how they're judged, but having that awareness that that's how others see you and having that perspective out there is valuable information to have, because it allows you to know where you need to come from in order to relay messages and give direction. I think we took that perspective one step further, and we talked about the real job of a leader at this point is to help prepare people to take the position that they currently hold. And by doing so, when you see and know that people are out there with this kind of opinion or thought or perspective, is to get them an opportunity to sit in your seat and see what the job really looks like. So in that leadership role, understanding where this statement comes from, and then giving people the opportunity to see how that actually fits or relates, or how it doesn't, into the actual role of the leader.
Super. You just did a great job. Now the next one I'm very interested in, because, well, let's see what you do with it. So we're going to go again, and we're going to now go to number 2. And so same drill. You were excellent on that. See what you can do with this.
How many minutes?
Same time. 8 minutes.
Okay.
This is really smart. Yeah, there. There they come. There. You got everyone. Okay, I'm excited about hearing what you have to say on this one. So who's up? Who wants to start? Trevor.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to go first because our group kind of posed something that was contrary to what I had initially assumed about this question. So, a diversity of opinion is, informing my own knowledge and experience, which is touching on the second part of the question of. So maybe I'll answer it in reverse. Actually, I'll just start with the beginning. Leaders should learn not to take criticism personally. When I first read this, when I was working on it with my partner outside of the class, I said, yeah, of course, leaders should learn to not take criticism personally. And it kind of touched on Jennifer Schiele's commentary about developing a thicker skin as a superintendent, but as a leader in any business capacity, being able to take that criticism but not take it personally. But my group kind of posed this question or the statement, well, what if you actually do need to make a change and take it to heart? And not necessarily have an emotional reaction about it, but you do need to hear it and then use that to inform how you move forward, which I thought was a really interesting way to look at it, and kind of opposite of what I was originally thinking. And I thought that was very valuable. And then the second part, nor should they accept criticism from someone they would never ask for advice from. Again, it was posed, well, yeah, if you're not going to appreciate or listen to them, then maybe you shouldn't take it to heart. But on the other side, if you automatically shut out somebody because you would never take advice from that person, or you think, I don't like the absolutes of never and always either, that is really sticky. But you lose out on that diversity and inclusion aspect of maybe there's something that you're missing, or in a unique perspective, obviously, that you're not expressing that someone else is. And I think that is important to incorporate that into making a cohesive team to be able to get things done.
Good job. Who's up?
Parker.
Parker.
Yeah, we had I think a similar conversation, but it kind of came back to perspective again, that everybody has an opinion. Everybody's going to give an opinion. Criticism is going to come from all areas, whether you ask for it or not. But it really depends on taking perspective, taking a step back, and looking at all the factors. Why did this person say this? Was it a bad experience? Is it what they've known for so long and they feel like with change that they need to say something because they're not comfortable with change? Is it a true reflection that somebody's personally attacking you or giving you something that you may or may not need to hear, or that you need to hear but you may or may not want to hear? But really taking any criticism or advice and taking a step back to pause, reflect, and take what you need to from that to make decisions better going forwards, or make changes for yourself or for the people you're leading. So
Good job.
Got Larry next.
Larry.
So I think we had a very similar conversation. Generally, the first part of the advice is not taking criticism personally. Everyone agreed, and used Jennifer's example of developing a thicker skin. And then we focused on the second advice and didn't per se agree with that, because criticism coming from a source that you wouldn't generally take advice from may be some of the most valuable criticism you could get, because by not wanting to take advice, it's probably someone you don't generally agree with, and you want to actually make that person feel heard, and should follow up and ask the why, and really get to the kernel of the truth of where they're coming from. And particularly if you can make them feel heard in their criticism, then maybe your next interaction with that person will go better.
Thank you. Good job.
One more, but
I don't know how to raise my hand, my little
Okay.
yellow hand, so I'll just.
Okay, okay. Go
Yeah,
for it.
I keep, I'm really fighting on these off meetings to make sure I'm the one that gets to present. I just want you to know that everyone in the group is striving to present, but I'm begging to be the one. Just to make that clear. You know, it's funny because I've frequently been told in my lifetime that, hey, you take everything personally. And I always say, yes, I do. I need to take things personally. Now, whether I choose, where the trick comes in, I think, on that is using a filter. Whether I choose to react to what you said to me and implement it. You know, there was a time where when I used to public speak, I for some reason I would get emotional, which I still do, but I would offhandedly throw swear words in there, and I didn't even really realize I was doing it. And I had someone one day come up and they go, you know, your points could be so valid, but you lose half the room when you swear. And you don't even think you're doing it, but you have to realize you're not talking to a group of high school football players or whatever. You need to pull that you know, that funnel and screen that out. And that was valuable information. And, you know, so that part, I took it personally, but I took it to heart and said, yeah, you know, you're right. I do that. And it's subconscious, but I know I do it. I mean, I hear it when it comes out, obviously. So that was an example of that. The part with, I mean, I think we all agree, we are going to seek who we think is going to give us positive feedback. Hey, Mom, I did really good today, didn't I? Right? Because you know your mom is not going to say, no, you didn't do very well. But my father would say that. He would tell you the truth. But I think you're drawn to go to positive feedback. And the important thing is, again, you've got to take feedback from people that aren't going to tell you what you want to hear, because that sometimes hits the nail on the head and, you know, propels you to be better, I think, as a leader.
Good job. Now, how many believe that if you had to make a choice as to good advice or poor advice, which way would you go? How many think it's good advice as stated? How many think it's bad advice as stated? Okay, and so I would ask the question this way. If you don't take it personally, how are you going to determine whether it really has merit or not? And for that reason, I've always considered it to be bad advice. Just because you benefit from hearing something, whether you give it credibility beyond that, that's a choice you can make. But if you don't listen to it and take it personally, what merit you might miss in somebody's criticism, that you're going to be in the public eye as a leader. I mean, you're making a choice to be vulnerable and taking a stand. And so there's going to be criticism heading your way. So let's try the third one. Let's try the third one. You're just knocking this out of the park. If you can pick a person who's not yet presented to present this time, we want to share opportunities here. So now you got number 3, same drill.
okay.
8 minutes.
Okay, off we go. Okay, that'll take us. Wow, everybody went this way. Good for them. Good for them. All right.
We're doing fine.
Yeah.
We're doing good. I'm glad we're doing this, and then we're going to do more. I'm actually going to send them into groups more because they're doing well with it.
Yeah.
And
I think they're connecting in between too. I think they're meeting up in between
Yeah.
the dual ones.
Yes.
Yeah. And the, recording in progress. And our second. Oh, it looks like Jason is already ready to record.
No, I
Good job,
want
Jason.
That's called being ready right there. He just came out with his hand up.
That's right. All
I want to
right.
get those thoughts across before I forget what they were.
Hey, go for it. Go for it.
Oh, are we ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and start this third question. Our group talked about that sometimes our work and leadership is not always measurable, and that leadership's not always a bean to count. And we talked about, some things we do that are not measurable, but we think about maybe the intrinsic value of what we provide with our leadership to the people we work with. You may not think about it, but if you can measure and say that, maybe 95, 96% of your employees stick around year after year, maybe that's a measure that you don't think about that speaks to people wanting to work with your leadership.
Excellent.
We have Ken next.
Ken.
Hi, yeah, so we unanimously agreed that it was good advice. And from a number of different perspectives, that part of it was ticking off boxes. You can't always get there with ticking off the boxes because there's things that you're going to miss that aren't on your list. And some of the items on your list may be irrelevant to the solution that you're trying to get to. One of us worked in data processing or a lot of data input, and they had the same thing to say about it was, we get all this data, but we have to sort out what's actually relevant data and look for what the data is telling us to look for in addition to that. So yeah, it's a statement with a lot of history, and like I said, we all agreed it was very good advice.
Super. Who's next?
Haley is next.
I'll speak to the 2 points that I took away from my group. One, we all agreed, although it maybe took a couple of us a little bit longer to understand what the advice actually was. We did agree that it was good advice. One, because what you have to realize is when you see this forward standing person, someone like Jennifer, she's showing up, she's superintendent, she's the best at what she does. You miss the whole story from the time that she was born to where she is now. There's so much preparation and experience that goes into who you are in this moment, and that's not all accounted for if it's not presented. And secondly, as a leader who knows there are things that are missed, there are things that aren't being counted, that are being kept track of, it's an opportunity to catch people doing something right, to celebrate them in, as Jennifer and then Andrea also repeated, identify the soft moments. There are those times where you catch someone doing something, celebrate them, praise them in that, because the big moment or what's counted is not always encapsulating of that.
Super.
Sarah next.
Sarah.
All right. So the takeaways that I had from our group is we talked about that there's so many things that we measure based on some sort of metric because Jamie brought up we want some like uniform way to compare or value things. And while those things may have importance and there may be a time
for those things to be considered, we also really need to place importance and value on the intangible things that can't necessarily have a number that can be counted or measured. And so we talked about like your ability to communicate or the energy that you bring to something. And so kind of in whole, our group talked about, well, there's so many things you have to think about, and some of them are measured, and there is a time and place, and there is importance on that. It's not an all or nothing situation. And a lot of the things that actually have more value than things that can be counted are things that can't be measured. So we thought it was definitely good advice.
Super. Great job. I want to add one other thing to my little story about my first teaching opportunity as a student teacher, where my master teacher asked me the question, what difference did it make? Years and years and years and years later, when I was superintendent of schools in Lake Oswego, I had a letter that a student who was in that class sent to me. And we did get things going, and we developed a special kind of energy in that session. And I was beating myself up for years about not doing more with what I had the capability to do. And he had just become an assistant professor of English at Stanford University. And he was citing that class, that experience with me, about him developing a real energy and a sense of energy, not just that, but the awe of what it made him feel like to be able to talk about things, listening to the Rolling Stones and being able to talk about the ideas and the music made him feel like in real terms for him. And he said it was the biggest motivator that he initially had in wanting to become a teacher. Now, what I'd say to you about that is you never know what your attempts as a leader to do something is going to mean to different individuals, and in a good way and in a bad way too. Because not everybody's the same, we know that. But so those attempts that you make to be better at what you do and introduce them. I mean, I knew I could engage them with the Rolling Stones. That was a cinch. Pretty thing. But to have him be able to thank me for doing that sort of difference in that classroom and the energy that it created in him going out of that class, which he never said anything to me before. I know he is. I was in school with his brother too, years before. And so you don't know. And what you do know is what you have some influence over. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is say, okay, what can we identify that you have influence over that you can get better at? And so if you really do know that your mind works a certain way and you have an initial response, system one response, and you have a secondary response that if you've got some time to think about things and you just thought about these quotes and you considered them well and you looked at them from different perspectives. And if you can get those two things to work together and use self-talk, listen to yourself, and see if you can't come up with better decisions, because you actually are making choices. Your brain will make a choice whether you do or not. That's a guarantee. So whether you actually think about that initial choice that your brain brings forward from your experience or not, there's the difference in that situation. All right, let's go to the second page, and I want to go to the top of the second page, and I'm going to put you back into your groups again. You're just lights out good today, so let's try it again. So on the second page, I start with saying something from John O'Donohue, and that's at the deepest level of human nature, there is no simple, singular, permanent self. You have a gallery of selves. You have different ways to express who you are. You can, let me ask you this thing. How do you react when you're hurt? When somebody has done something that is hurtful to you, emotionally hurtful, how do you react? And what do you do in a leadership situation where somebody's criticism, for example, might be hurtful to you? What do you know about your typical immediate reaction, for example, and how do you then work with that over that moment where you feel like you've been wronged, and even if you're not wronged necessarily, are being hurt? You have a choice of what mindset you use, and you have a choice of what you can do to help yourself to be the person that is called for to the best of your ability in a leadership situation that requires and can benefit from you being the best self you can be. Does that make sense? That is sort of what we're talking about here. And all year I'm putting things in front of you. I want to go back to what we did earlier in the year and say, I've got a frame of reference that I use all the time, that I talk with myself about. Like, is this a situation where I need to assert influence over other people? I'm the superintendent. I can do that. Is this a situation where I need to build relationship through the connection that I have with other people, to be vulnerable, to share, to actually trust, and to communicate? Or is this a golden opportunity for me to influence somebody? Like, let's use Jennifer Schiele's example. Like, she sent communications to these female leaders, and they now 4 out of 5 or something like that have picked up on that and have decided to do more schooling in that direction. We've got influence over, influence through, influence to. First of all, you can't lead if you can't influence. If your presence and who you are doesn't allow you to make a difference, Mabel Thompson, what difference did it make? She asked me. Well, it was a good question. I didn't handle it well. But what I'm asking you to do now is I want to have you use a frame of reference and talk about how this works. Because you need influence, and you need one other thing in combination with influence. Adaptability. You have to adapt as a leader to be what's needed in a situation. You've got to be able to read the context, and you've got to be able to be capable of changing your mindset and your behavior and your presence to be the kind of leader you need to be. Sometimes it's going to call for you to just shut up and get out of the way of what's happening, even though you're in a leadership role. Sometimes you have to fire somebody that you like and you've worked with for years because the person has done something that you can't live with and the organization cannot live with. But how do you do that? How do you influence people when you influence over them? What's the secret to doing that when you have that mindset? How do you influence through? What are you willing to be vulnerable about? And then how do you encourage other people to lead, and how do you role model those kind of things? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take influence over, influence through, and influence to. And I want to ask you to do this. I want you to think about yourself, and I want you to say, what behaviors do you think, and what mindset do you think is going to make you more successful when you have to tell people that we're not going to do what you want us to do, and we have to do this? Or how do you make that work for you? How do you make it work for you to be open enough and vulnerable enough with other people? And where are the limits with that? So what does it call for you to be that kind of a person in that situation? And then to influence others to continue to grow and become the person they're capable of becoming. So the what, why, how sort of framework that I keep asking you to do, what is it that it is influence over to you as you think about leadership? And what is it to influence through building relationships with others? Where are the barriers? Where are the limits? Influence to. So I want you to talk about this frame of reference and tell me, how does it work? How does this work for you as you share with your group? I want your insights about how you make this work. How can you make this work? This frame of reference. Asking yourself, okay, am I being the person I need to be in this situation, using this frame of reference? Okay. And so I'm just looking for your insights in how to do it, the how-to part. And so 10 minutes, see what you've got. And anybody who is willing to speak, to share, make a little list about the insights that you can come up with about this, to apply this frame of reference to your leadership. Okay, 10 minutes.
Okay, there you go. Everybody's out. Here they come. Everybody's out.
Hey, it's great to have you back. I just got way too excited and I lost track of time. So what I would like, you're just killing it. So what I'd like to have each group do, just give us one insight. And then I want Christopher to have time to wrap up. So one insight from each of your groups that you think was a good insight to share, and then we'll turn it over to Christopher.
Okay, yes, Cecily and then Jamie.
Cecily and then Jamie.
Yes, we had a great discussion. I would say the one big statement is you would have to walk the talk. So number 2 and number 3 would have to be first before number 1 can happen.
Okay, cool. Other one,
You have Jamie?
You ready?
yes.
Okay, we had a lot of good points. Honestly, this question is the entire reason I took this class. I have lots of thoughts and I kept that to myself because we did have a really good quality conversation. I could have a whole conversation about that. But the main point is to start with through instead of over or to, making connections. So Tricia kind of pointed out making connection, which amplifies willingness to take another's perspective. And I think a really good point that Trevor made was that doing so through storytelling, because that's kind of a way of communication that we've used all the way through time, back from cave paintings to this morning whenever you started with a story. Kind of puts things in a perspective that make other people recognize and identify with stuff.
Super.
Yeah, George.
George. George.
I gotta hit all the right buttons.
Okay,
Okay, so
go
yeah,
for it.
so to follow on Jamie, I did talk the whole time on this. So this fit right into some of the work that I've been doing personally with some development and working with a coach over the last 6 months or so. Because had you asked me about 6 months ago how I would respond to somebody who disagreed with me or maybe was a little bit difficult to deal with, I would tell you that I probably would just bury him. But and I don't mean that literally. So what I've learned over the last 6 months is that I actually have to become more in the present and more take a position in neutrality rather than get myself in a position where I need to respond, and actually listen and become more curious. And we all find that we have things that we want to protect. For whatever reason, we have things in our lives that we decide that we have to protect for whatever reason that has been developed. And where we really start to learn and grow is when we can actually put ourselves in a position of neutrality, look to how we can evolve and how we can expand. And the only way we do that is by asking questions of the people who are providing that information to us and create a safe space so that when they do that, we don't take their head off and we don't retaliate for the information that we have. So creating that safe space, developing a place where people have a voice, whether it's people within my organization or whether it's people out in the community, voice is a huge thing for us, and giving people a seat at the table and a sense of belonging. And as long as you treat people fairly and allow them to say what they think and walk away knowing that they've been heard, the outcome of the decisions that you make become much more palatable to those who don't necessarily agree with you. That's why I spoke for the full time.
Good insight, great advice. Who's last?
Bill, I'll speak for our group in the interest of time and just moving things forward and say, first of all, thank you very much, and great thoughts all the way around. One of the things that Larry talked about was the fact that in his hierarchical organization where he had power over others, he did his best to develop them until by the time he left, he had mid-level people doing CEO or executive level work, things the executives used to think that was only their own purview. And I think that's an absolutely great use of setting the conditions for other people's success. So thank you, Larry, for sharing that. And Dr. Korach, going back to your story today, that notion of what difference did it make? I want to thank everybody for being here today. And I think you all know that my big question is, what difference did today make, right? This is going to be one of those leadership axioms that either works or doesn't work for you. You can think about it and determine if this is good advice or not good advice. But personally, I always think of exactly what Dr. Korach said there. What difference did it make? At the end of today, did our discussions today leave you in a place that you're actually going to make a different decision, or that your behavior is going to shift or change as a result of something you heard today? And I really like what Kaylee said about the opportunity to catch somebody doing something good. So I think that in general, when we're trying to be leaders and empowering them, I think it's very akin to that statement of catching somebody doing something good, but the statement catching somebody doing something good is so pointed. I would like to ask you all to try and do that over the next month. If you'll make, I'm going to ask you if you'll make it your personal mission to spend a month focused on trying to catch somebody doing something good. Now, you don't have to be perfect at it. It doesn't have to work well. You just have to spend a month with that as your focus. And then it'll be very interesting to see what that does to your relationships and your ability to identify and become sensitive to opportunities for complimenting people. I think there's going to be a lot, and I think that you will find that that does actually make a difference. And again, Korach brought up another thing. You're never going to know where that influence goes. You may catch somebody doing something good and they may or may not respond to it in a manner that you see right now. And maybe 15 years later, you're going to get an email from them saying that one day when you told me that one thing, you gave me the confidence to step forward. But most of our good work is going to go unnoticed, and you're not going to understand the ramifications of the things that you've done. You just have to do it because it's what you want to do as a leader and because it's something that you identify with. So thank you all for being here this month. Thank you all for making the rapid schedule change that we did in light of the ice storm. I'm glad we had as many of you as we did. And so thank you all. We will look forward to next month. And as before, reach out to your partners, reach out to us, and let us know if there's anything we can do to improve this process for you. All right. Everybody have a fantastic rest of the month, and we'll see you next month.